I guess the first order of business is to approve the minutes from our last meeting, which was April the 7th. Get a motion. Jill, Paul seconds. All in favor? Unanimous. Anybody here for public comment? No public comment. Move quickly to number 3, the chair's report. Big week for our little project. On Monday, the RTM approved our interim appropriation for an aggregate of $3.7 million. So that's really good news. We have money now to spend. And then Tuesday and Wednesday evening, we'll get to that in a second, is the next item on the agenda. We interviewed 4 separate architectural firms. Those were our semifinalists from their submissions of their RFPs. And I think Paul will report on that for the subcommittee. But things are moving along. So
at the RTM, the vote was?
At the RTM, the vote was, I think it was 99% to 1 for 2 out of the 3 schools and 96% to 3 for 1 of the schools.
There was a question about homes and why that number is lower.
Right.
Which Chris was explaining that because it's the renovation of the library versus a rebuild. Right. That's more or less why the number is lower. And there may be a few other reasons, and of course it's still conceptual design. But I think that's probably something we'll end up addressing a little more directly in June.
Right. And there was also a discussion about the
Curtis.
Adjoining parcel, the Curtis property.
Curtis, yeah. Well, we need to sit down and have a formal conversation.
We need to what? I'm sorry?
Sorry, sit down and have a formal conversation.
And as I said, basically, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg because we need to figure out if that property is useful, if it's wetlands or not wetlands, and we'll find part of that. We'll get some of that from our surveyor when that comes back. Why don't, with that, we turn to the report from the Architectural Selection Subcommittee.
Okay, so the subcommittee met with, we had 9 candidates to start with. We pared that down to 4. We interviewed 4 candidates. Am I allowed to say that Mr. Lynch and Dr. Adley and Chris also sat in with the subcommittee for the interviews? I thought all the interviews were professional and thorough, and we were very pleased. We ultimately want to make a recommendation to this committee that we go forward with 3, KG&D, Fuller and D'Angelo, and Perkins Eastman, to procure them to do charrettes. So that is our recommendation, and we need to vote on that. If there's any questions or before we vote on it, any comments?
Can you repeat those names for me, if you don't mind?
Sure.
KG&D, Fuller, and I'm sorry?
D'Angelo and Perkins Eastman.
Thank you. Would you like a motion?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, before we move and approve, should we discuss process? I mean, I guess we can vote on the selection, but we can probably also make sense just while we're here to talk about process and next steps. But might as well vote on the approval. So if we have a motion, we can get a motion to approve retaining Perkins Eastman, Fuller D'Angelo, and KG&D to prepare charrettes to be delivered by May the 9th. We get a motion for that. Paul, all in favor?
David and Paul.
Paul and David, all in favor, unanimous. So we should talk about next steps. We got from Town Hall, from Kate Bush, some sample letters and emails. So we need to notify the 3 finalists and the one that is not going to be asked to be a finalist, and that's Northeast Collaborative. So we can notify them. It looks like they were notified by email. I think it probably makes sense to then follow up by a phone call, certainly for the 3 finalists. And then I think the other thing we were thinking of doing, or we were going to do, was Jill had done some follow-up phone calls with regard to Perkins Eastman. We were gonna ask Perkins Eastman, or condition their being considered on finding a new or different MEP engineer, that the MEP engineer that they came out with, that there was part of their proposal, has just not been acceptable to the town. And
Correct.
we were gonna ask them to replace that MEP engineer when they do their charrette and come back and modify their proposal to reflect that. I don't think we're gonna tell them which one. I think they're gonna, they know who the field of more qualified engineers are.
And what is the date they're due back?
They're due back on the 9th of May.
9th, okay.
Does, would it make sense while we're here to split up the group for phone calls? Paul, is there any of those that you would?
I'm
be happy
comfortable
to
calling,
call?
I'm happy to call any of them. I can call Fuller.
Sure. You wanna call Fuller? You wanna call KG&D and I'll call Perkins?
Sure.
And just tell them about the engineer, give them the lowdown on the engineer?
Sure.
Okay. And then, in terms of preparing the letters and the emails, we can work off of that. I guess those probably best come from me.
Mhm.
Is that, okay?
Yeah, the head of the committee.
I would just like if I could get some help to put together the actual letters.
I can help.
You can help on that?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you get, if you haven't gotten it already, maybe you could forward to Dave
Yep.
Karen's email that has the
Mhm.
actual, in effect, retainer letter to these
Okay.
guys. Because I think it has to be signed, it's ultimately signed by Monica.
Okay.
at
But I
least-
can
at
draft
least-
it off of what she's gonna send, pretty much.
There's
The
a
contract
boilerplate.
is.
Yeah, it looks like it's,
signed.
yeah, the letter, the contract, but it looks like there was a letter.
The letters too.
Yeah, if you look, there's some sample emails.
It's in here, I just have to dig it up.
Yeah, Karen sent it around earlier today.
Mhm.
There was a formal letter saying, we're asking you to do this, we're gonna pay you $10,000.
Okay.
Here are the conditions, here's what you're supposed to do, et cetera, et cetera.
So what, yeah, if you just forward that to me, I'll find it, Jill,
Okay.
and then I can draft it up and send it back to you guys. Let me know if it
Wonderful.
looks right.
And then I think Karen Dunn can probably coordinate getting them signed by
Mhm.
Monica and sent out.
Just try to make sure we make contact no later than tomorrow so that they
Yes.
have the full time. So,
Correct.
I'll call Fuller first thing.
Well,
Yes,
town hall is closed tomorrow.
well, I think by
No, but we
the,
can email
We
them.
Yes, you can email them.
but by the
Monica,
calendar, we have to
okay.
notify them on Monday.
Yes.
So I think as long as we do a phone call tomorrow, then
Right.
that'll be followed by formal
Mhm.
notification
Yep.
on Monday that meets our timeline and also is
Gives them
kind.
Well, I can
to-
also send out the email to them saying, the email saying, we've selected you to be a finalist. And then the phone call, I think, is an additional courtesy. That's okay.
That's fine.
Does that work for you?
Mhm.
So if the letters go out early next week, that's fine?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll look at them again to make sure there's nothing in there that we need to think about, whether we say it one way, say it the same way or different way or whatever. And I still need to have a discussion with Kate Bush, unless people feel differently. My inclination is for us to be proactive with the AIA contract, because the contract for Ox Ridge was pretty heavily negotiated, and that we'd like to get the benefit of what was negotiated into that form agreement by Ox Ridge. My preference would be to have that agreement, for us to prepare the agreement in the form we want it, and send that to the architects and have them respond with any of their comments, so that we would consider that as part of the selection criteria. What do you think of that as a process matter?
I understand where you're, I think your logic is sound, reasoning sound. It's an extra, you're then trying to get that done by the 9th.
we could try to get at least trying to get their initial comments back by the
Right.
9th, to let us know either we hate this contract, we're not gonna sign it, we don't wanna do your job, or we can work with this contract, we're not gonna have a lot more comments.
I think it's sound, I think what I'm looking at is basically they've got 11 days to prepare a charrette, 11 working days, based on the phone call tomorrow morning. They certainly have people in-house that could start looking at contract language if we send them something, but I'm also wanting them to focus clearly on coming up with a
You think
design.
it's a distraction?
No, it could, mildly, but, you know, it also, it might behoove us to wait until we get who we want, then start having a conversation with them. That way, we're not doing it in triplicate.
Yeah, yeah.
That's my, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, let me think
Thought
about that.
process,
I mean,
yeah.
I was thinking of, you know, using the leverage of it being a bid situation to have them take an easy hand on the contract.
Right, but they can also come back to us and just say, after, once we had not, yes, if there's something really egregious that comes up and that would sway us from picking one of them based on the fact that they were not agreeing to a contract. But if everything were apples to apples, you know, you just don't want that after the fact, then they all of a sudden decide to pull something out, you know,
Right,
so.
I mean, if we pick somebody and they become really, really difficult on the contract, we can
Like Mike had mentioned that
bag them and go to.
Slam didn't sign their contract for her.
Yeah, it was a long time. And I don't know what.
They were retained, but they were,
I think there was some sort of monetary retainer given to them. so
and they were
could
retained
start
and
to
actually
work.
had started work.
Yeah, oh, yeah, they weren't like, you know, we'll pick up the pen and turn on the computer when you pay us and sign. They were working right
Okay,
along.
all right.
They, you know, it was good faith negotiations, but they did take a long time.
Well, right, and that's,
And in fact, the negotiations with the CM, they weren't concluded, you know, middle of May or anything. It was well after July 1st.
okay.
But there was some sort of agreement that, you know, we're gonna get there.
Which makes sense, right? I mean,
And we're in the ballpark of, you know, everything except a few little nits.
yeah, I think it would be a huge waste of time and legal fees to start from scratch with the architect's contracts, right? Because we already know that there's a lot of the stuff that was in the Oxbridge contract that we're gonna want get the benefit of.
And there's a lot of the contract that, you know, the state says,
Yeah.
you have to have this, you're not allowed to have that. So,
It's a
and
fair amount
these
of
guys are familiar
boilerplate.
with Connecticut, all three firms, so
Mhm.
there's no real surprise coming from either
Okay.
side.
Okay. So maybe we'll not make that a priority item.
The other thing is, I think people that might be looking at architect contracts may be knee-deep in interviewing CMs at the time,
Right.
so.
Maybe.
Well, will be, will
I was gonna
be,
say may.
will be, and
Oh, okay.
so, but it's not a bad idea to try to streamline the process and
All right.
get ahead of it. I see where you're going with it, I just, timing-wise, when I look at the calendar and see the dates, I just trying to be.
Well, you could play it the other way. Ask them to send you
Right.
what they consider a typical contract, and then the town attorney can compare that to.
Well, yeah, that was
You
what
know,
Kate,
so
that's what
on
Kate
them.
suggested was kind of the normal order of things in that business.
Yeah.
I don't think we want to do that. I don't think we want to be reviewing 3 separate architectural contracts, right, at this stage in the process. I think we'd rather pick our horse. But,
Okay.
okay. So segueing then to the general contractor, or I'm sorry, any other discussion points with regard to the architectural selection process? No? Okay.
Looking forward to moving forward.
Yeah, it's exciting. I think you're right. I think the interviews were pretty interesting. General contractor RFQs, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Contractors came back with,
More than that, right?
what's that? Is that not right?
Well, I see
Or
5, but I
can I
thought
not
there was
count?
more than, no, I thought there was more in the list, but who sent us a list
Kate
today?
sent us a list.
Anyway, I'll just look while you're talking.
Not Kate, I'm sorry, Karen Dunn sent us a list.
Here it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Never mind. It's just, sorry.
Can we say who we have? Is that all right?
Yeah, so.
I see Owen
You can- why don't you just read it right-
Turner.
right-
Newfield, Downs, Turner, Fusco, and ONG.
I'm missing one.
Newfield, Downs, Turner, Fusco, and ONG AP.
Newfield Downs, two different ones.
Or
Two different ones,
Yeah,
yes.
Newfield.
Newfield. Yeah,
Yes.
I know Newfield, I don't know Downs.
Okay.
Downs, Turner,
Fusco.
ONG,
and
Fusco.
yeah.
Can you guys do your magic again?
and we're gonna ask, yeah,
Please.
Dr. Hadley.
Just,
I didn't ask this time, I'm just.
no,
on
I
the
mean, if it
record.
works well, that's fine, that's easy.
It was great. Thank you very much.
What are they doing?
They'll put it onto a page for us so we can access
So
it.
you don't
I
have to carry the
believe
book.
the person from Downs was with Colliers
Oh,
the last time through and worked as a helper
okay,
with the grant,
okay,
and then didn't get picked as CM,
okay,
and he subsequently went to Downs
okay,
from Colliers.
okay.
Can you forward, just if you have it up, can you
Yes.
forward to
Just so I know
Sarah
the
that
names for the
email?
minutes.
Yes,
Michelle.
yes, I will.
Newfield did that.
So, I'm gonna display my ignorance here. What do we do next? Now that we have these RFQs, what's the next step with the RFQs?
Subcommittee.
Obviously, read them.
Right, your subcommittee reads them, the other members of the committee go through them, see if they have any big questions or whatever, and then the subcommittee would recommend yes for proposals from however many you want, 2, 1, 4.
Right.
Your call.
Similar to what we did with the architects.
Right, but that step, that's the step from going from RFQ to asking for proposals, and I assume that's a formal town process of sending out an RFP, not an
Correct.
RFQ. We don't need to interview them first, we don't need to interview them in that
No, it
initial
saves you
vetting
a double
process.
interview.
I'm sorry?
Saves you the double interview.
Correct, and so we then send out RFPs, just so we're all on
So
board in
send
terms of dates and
a
timelines.
request for
RFPs
RFP.
are due the 28th.
When would we shoot to send the RFPs out?
Or no, notification of RFP is due the 28th, sorry.
Yeah.
So we have to pick by the 28th who we want RFPs from.
I'm just making a note, send RFP 428, and RFPs are due back.
May
May
19th,
19th.
but we'll interview in the
We'll
interim.
interview
But
between.
you would be interviewing, but that's my question, why would we be interviewing people before we get their responses to proposal back? Why wouldn't we read their proposal
I'm not
and then
sure
interview?
how this timeline got set up, but that is a valid question.
Is it possible that they would submit early? Or
No,
I'm just curious, I don't know.
not a chance.
Well, then we should
Dates
move
get
it.
transposed?
I don't know. Let's follow up with Kate and.
Because it doesn't make sense to me that we would interview people prior to
Before.
getting their proposals,
Yeah.
right? If we did it in the same
We need-
sequence as we did the architects, we'd want to see their proposals and
Right,
then
'cause
possibly narrow the field down even further before we
We need
interview.
to, we need to level the scope based on their proposals.
Right.
Yeah, and the
So-
selection isn't due till May 26th, so.
So I think maybe those two line items should be flipped, but they're not gonna be able to put together.
So we would select on May the 26th.
Well, let's.
That's because then you have between the 19th.
You know what? My suggestion would be that you create a timeline that you think is ideal based on what information we're going to have when, and based on kind of your thoughts about the architect and what we're going to know from a construction and cost perspective. And you talk to Kate about the sequence of events.
Mhm.
And just make sure we have that right, and then let's cross-check.
I think that's
Come up
right,
with
because I
correct
think,
dates.
I think that timeline that doesn't have to be carved in stone. I mean, that may have been suggested by the town, but we can rationalize that timeline.
These dates aren't,
They're not like they're voted on, they're
oh,
not.
that's what I was asking, 'cause you know
Well,
how
they're-
things get in this room.
They're formal, yeah, no, we didn't vote on them.
Okay.
But they're-
So the original
But they're legal notice.
timeline
So we have some
should have been
plans.
copied from Oxbridge, which was
Yes.
copied from the DPW garage.
Yes.
So I can ask Ed Gentile.
Well, I have the
on
Oxbridge,
Monday.
hang
Yeah,
on a
we have it
second, I
right here,
have
yeah.
the Oxbridge timeline. So the Oxbridge timeline,
Yeah, the interviews were,
after reviewing 8 proposals from contractors and interviewing 3, the joint venture was selected. That was May 17th.
Right, but they did have the proposals
But they
before
had
they
the
selected.
proposals before they interviewed.
Okay.
They reviewed 8 proposals, they interviewed 3.
Yeah, it looks like it came back.
So then, when we just clarify from Kate if we have to amend anything.
Wait, so Chris, I see that they came back on the 13th and 14th of May, and the
When were the interviews?
oh no, sorry, the issued. So the interviews I show is 13th and 14th, and the RFP being due the 16th. So it's the same thing. Am I looking at the Oxbridge?
I'm not, yeah, I don't have that, I'm looking more at the
So
the
they
historical
interviewed based
timeline.
off the RFQ.
Okay. Will you ask Ed also?
Yeah, I wasn't,
I'm looking.
I'm trying to think when they, for the DPW, I was in the audience for the interviews, but
Yeah.
not for the Oxbridge.
Okay.
Let's just take a look.
This, yeah.
What are you you're looking at the timeline from Oxford?
Yeah, the Oxbridge one. Yeah.
Yeah, this shows, like you said, that the finalists, they did select final. The RFQ was due on the 2nd, and they picked finalists based on that. And then the RFP was issued, and interviews were scheduled on the 6th. And then they interviewed finalists on the 13th, 14th, and then RFP was due on the 16th. And then the selection was made the next day.
Would they need the benefit of the interviews to finalize their RFP? It's kind of weird, right?
RFP issued, interview scheduled. Finalist interviews 13, 14.
So Mike will talk to Kip, Chris will talk, sorry,
Yeah.
Mike will talk to Ed, Chris will talk to Kip and Kate. You're gonna drum up your own, and then we can come up with next steps.
I would just think you would get the RFPs back and then do your interviews. Scope out everybody.
But I think also you're gonna look at, ideally, when we would interview based on what's coming back from the architects and our information from a cost perspective, right?
Right, but this, they're not gonna have a fully formed plan to look at. They're gonna be
Understood.
doing off the study. But what we need to dig into is their general conditions, their CM fee, contingency fees, their logistics of 3 sites, the schedule, same things, the team players and how they're gonna handle the projects.
I would love to know from you if, based on the architecture timeline and this timeline, if you would move anything back on the construction manager timeline. Again, not right now,
I think I want to ask the question, how much do we need from the CM, if anything, for June 30th?
okay.
Mhm.
And then I can make that determination. I think it's minimal, Mike, is that my understanding? That really it's, our grant consultant, it's the architect, it's the, internal people
Right,
at the
they
architect.
did do a look at the cost estimate.
The
Right.
CM did?
Do we
Yes.
have to see them in place before Oxford on the vote in June or no?
Yeah, 'cause
Yes.
it's saying it had a
Yeah,
bite
they were
like that.
awarded, where's that piece of paper?
Yeah, the CM was in place, and the CM did have a cost estimator.
Yeah, the CM was awarded on the 17th of May, so that
Wow.
means they had,
That's really compressed.
Wow.
well, they interviewed, again, they're,
They may have interviewed based off of the,
RFQ.
picked a couple RFQs, interviewed those people, and sort of gave them a direction to flesh out their RFP.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
And then made their decision.
they were in
I just
contract.
want to check on that
31st.
because, like I said, I wasn't, I was at the RFP.
What role would,
interviews for
what role
DPW.
would the architect have, if any, as part of the CM selection? Would we want input from our selected architect?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it was, have they worked with
Have
them
they worked with them
successfully?
before? Have they had successful
Yeah.
relations? Do they, yeah,
So
nothing.
priority one is
nothing
the architect engineer, and then they can help us with the CM process.
Nothing is more important than the.
Why don't I also, why don't I add
architects.
to my list calling Ray Wiley and asking him, he's our grant consultant, asking Ray what role the CM plays in putting our grant proposal together? What, how important are they in putting the proposal together?
That's my question.
Okay, great.
As versus what we're getting from the architect, what we're getting from O&G, not in that capacity, but in their grant consulting capacity, and looking at putting the aggregate estimate together.
if you want a smooth project, you need an architect and a CM who have a history together, a positive history together. And just as important, and on this project, equally as important, is the engineering firm. Because this is such a large engineering project. So we,
As we're developing these dates, let's keep Dave in the loop so that he can see
Yes.
Yeah.
the sense
Yeah,
of
let's
it.
just copy him and all that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
What's the 21st?
Mhm.
Okay. Anything else on the CM process? Okay. We have an agenda item for hygienics. Mike, is hygienics the environmental engineer?
Yeah. I sent you the 3 proposals,
Right.
right? So, you guys want to discuss them and then,
I think the recommendation, well, you sent the 3 proposals, and I think we talked about them, we talked a little bit with Randy Giraldo, and the idea was that hygienics was kind of far and away the right people to do it for the 3 schools.
then it would be you guys voting to hire them in case.
Yeah, I mean, do people want to discuss that, or it's really to do the environmental, the hazmat and asbestos survey? And I think they have been doing those studies.
They've been doing our 3-year inspections. They've been training our new employees, our new maintenance guys and custodians as they come on. They've been doing the buildings probably close to 20 years.
Okay.
and you're happy with their performance?
Very, yes.
What exactly, what are they doing exactly? And did we see these proposals? I don't know that I actually physically saw them.
And what they do is they do slightly destructive testing to make sure wherever they feel something's going to be disturbed, an obvious pipe chase, they'll open the wall, see what's in there, asbestos, et cetera. They'll test surfacing material if it looks suspicious.
Vibration isolation, or that's for the structural?
Excuse me?
Vibrations and stuff of that nature?
Well, vibration cloth on dampers, in a 1940 building, most of that stuff, if it's visible, it's in their records already.
Okay.
They will test window caulking. Some they already have. Like at Oxbridge, they tested the window caulking. They tested masonry around the windows because it leaks. You would know. It leaches, the oil leaks.
Yeah. Okay.
They test the soil. They test paint for lead. They test for asbestos. They test. They're starting to test now for vermiculite as an insulating material because it contains asbestos-like fibers. So they do a very thorough job.
Let me ask this another way, Mike. Is there because it's a school, is there a list that they are supposed to be, things that they're supposed to be testing from the state?
No, they know from their training.
These are just standard practices that they know?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm
I'm just concerned that if there's,
Yeah, well, you start with, what year is it, and then
Right,
you
yeah.
look at, okay, what are the surfacing materials? And you're looking at plaster, you're looking at paint, you're looking at glues, you're looking at decorative frets and things like that
Mastic.
around windows. Mastic on floor top. Now, the good news is, in these buildings, the floor tile has all been abated
Okay.
many years ago.
what about the caulking?
The caulking in several of the buildings has been abated.
Okay.
You have hidden thermal insulation that has not been abated. It's been maintained, with the operations and maintenance
But
plan.
not been disturbed, so.
Exactly. You
But
do have-
go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, you do have certain things, like we know, there's certain things that are, transite board in certain areas, that, so these are all known quantities to hygienics right now. They're in our asbestos reports. They're, it's open to the public, it's in every building. But it's the destructive testing, actually coring a sample out of some plaster,
Yes.
opening up a pipe chase on a Friday night or a Saturday morning with children or staff in the building. That sort of testing, they'll do off hours, and that's what they did at Oxbridge.
But the work they're doing, the work we're asking them to do now is their study in advance, obviously, of the architect. The architects would get their study
Yes.
and would know if they open this wall or they open this area, here's what's there. So it's
Plan on budgeting
Right.
for so much,
Correct.
of this and that type of abatement. But, the roofs have all been changed out, there's no asbestos on the roofs, there's a minimal amount of PCB caulking in some roof materials, but everything else has been, tested, abated correctly, we have all those records. So we're in good shape on these buildings.
Question is, do you want to see the other, how many, you got 3 proposals? I'm
I
trying to
sent them.
recall. I might have a
Yes,
spinning earlier
yes,
this
there were
week.
3.
Yeah,
I got a proposal for each location.
understood. But from how many vendors?
I used hygienics only because it's sort of like a specialized
Mhm.
field. You'd be really switching horses in the middle of the
Yeah.
race to go bring in somebody else who starts.
So the question really is are we happy going with the known quantity, the current engineer in that space, or do we, I thought we were fine going with them on that basis.
I think both
and
the
that there was no-
architect and the construction manager at Oxbridge were happy with the thoroughness. And he writes the abatement specification too.
Right.
He doesn't just say, here it is. He writes the whole specification, and the architect puts it in their plans, and the CM takes that specification and puts it in their contracts and instructions with the demolition contractor
Right,
and things like
right.
that. So it's,
And presumably an abatement contractor if they need one, right?
yes.
I'm
So-
comfortable with moving
Yeah.
forward.
So with that, do we have more discussion on that, or are we comfortable moving forward?
I'm comfortable, I just don't know as a committee if we should review them and then look at them, or if we, based on the fact that they've done this for so long, we're okay with them.
Yeah, would you like to look at them and take it up next week?
I don't know what kind of time crunch that puts us under with them, if any.
Does it affect our timing, particularly to wait a week?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right.
Well, I don't see any reason to hold it up, I'm just asking
You wanna
more,
do your
the
due
I can
committee.
certainly send you the proposal in any
Jill
case.
sent them to me, I'm just waiting for her to open them. I just wanted to, I don't see any reason to change anything that we're doing, and I think we should approve the people that Mike's comfortable with. They've done it for 20 years. I just, again, I always,
You want to review it?
as a committee, it's our job, should we just look at it and make sure before we vote on it? That's,
Okay,
So then we'll
Devil's
have to defer approval on that for a week?
that's fine.
Yep.
Do you
Makes
want to
sense.
send the
Yeah, would you send
proposal?
the?
Do you want me to send
I
it?
did.
Do you, you did already?
I got it.
Okay.
Yeah, I got it. Send it to you.
I did
Let's-
it,
the
Mike.
internet is.
Oh, you said it there? Mike?
Unbelievably
All right,
slow.
Thank you.
You're in copy.
So let's put that, which is then goes to our next item, let's put that on next week's agenda. Um, I didn't have any other business for this evening. We can collect. Everybody's welcome to take one of the RFQs. Should we leave them in here for, I guess, should we walk them down the hall and leave them in Karen's office if people can come pick them up?
Sure.
If they want them, I'll send an email to the committee that they're here if people want them.
Mhm.
I may have, the subcommittee for CM review,
Mhm.
did we,
It's the same one as the
Same.
architect.
same, that's, I just want to clarify.
Right.
Okay.
Chris, do you want me to send this to you or the entire committee?
The entire committee, if you could. I think there's a group created on our email, it's the HHR.
Well, I'll just,
Let's send everybody home.
I have to
It's
look at
been
this
late
week, and I
nights.
don't want to take, I think there's only
With that,
9 there, so.
with that, can we get a motion to adjourn? Paul motions, Jill seconds, all in favor?
Thank you.
Have a real dinner.